Thank you. Good evening. Today, I stand here in a transparent, beautifully yet harsh reality that my child has been deceased longer than she lived. 2,392 days have passed since my youngest daughter, Lorelle, died. Honestly, I have written and spoken about her death more times than I can count. Each time it is different, but somehow the same. The fact that she died at 6.5 is unchanged, but my feelings ranged from a shattered heart to a comforted soul. Grief is truly the most palpable, subjective, and constant emotion I have ever felt. An unknown author stated it best: grief is the container that holds all the emotions felt as a result of a loss. If I were to use this analogy, I would tell you on November 23rd, 2015, I got a container I never wanted. On an early Monday morning, I woke up to my youngest daughter dying from a relentless and fatal seizure. Despite all our CPR efforts and the paramedics' help, my youngest daughter's life was over. With her last breath, I struggled to breathe myself. Guilt, indescribable sadness, and suffocating grief overtook my mind, and it shattered my heart. Our fun-loving family of six, in a matter of an hour, became a quintet. My eldest daughter said her heart was crushed. My husband went into solitude. My other daughter said, I've lost my best friend. My son, he was afraid to go to sleep because his sister went to sleep and never woke up. Our magnificent parents and loved ones, they tried to comfort us, but they had no idea how to support us. Our entire world had shifted. My home had become an abyss I no longer recognize. This storm in our life I tried to navigate alone, but our ship was sinking and capsizing. There's a saying that a boat doesn't capsize because of the amount of water around it, but because of the amount of water that gets in. And individually and collectively, the grief became too heavy for us to remain afloat. We needed more than help, we needed hope. Unexpectedly, I had become so distraught that I wanted and I tried to grieve without God. I felt so alone. I didn't want God to find me in the dark place that I was, but actually that's where I found him. Just as it is written in Psalms 34:18, the Lord is near to the brokenhearted and saves those crushed in spirit. With God, I reluctantly but obediently sought counseling. I had a persistent pursuit to find help. I Googled, yes, I Googled, and I found Cornerstone of Hope's website. The first sentence I saw was never grieve alone. Wow. I tell you, those words have carried me from silence to speaking, and from grieving alone to grieving with grace. In counseling, I was welcome to bring my container of grief and to share it without apprehension or fear of judgment. Graciously, I learned how to unpack my feelings and still remain in the truth of my pain. So I have to tell you, at my first session, I met Mark. And I remember thinking, oh my goodness, that's Bobby's dad from the website. Mark was smiling and so compassionate. His smile became another reason for me to endure. Because I wanted to smile again. That's all. I just wanted to smile again. And I remember thinking, if Mark and Christy could endure their unthinkable loss, surely God would keep me too. You know, it's amazing in tragedy who becomes your heroes. Now, you may be wondering if all of that came from one introduction in one session, and the answer is yes. Now, I'm not implying that everyone has the same experiences, but I couldn't have made it another day. I needed a glimpse of hope, and God granted that here. Until counseling, I had no words to articulate my loss and all the grief that derived from her death. For the first time as a mom, I felt incompetent. But counseling taught me that I didn't have to be competent, but I did learn how to be consolable. When a wife loses a husband, she becomes a widow. When a husband loses their wife, they become a widower. When a child loses their parent, they become an orphan. But when a parent loses their child, who do we become? I didn't have a name for the loss, but in counseling, I learned I didn't lose my name, my role, or my relationship with Lorelle. Counseling was vital for me to unpack that container. At the Cornerstone of Hope, we began to heal and grieve as a family. As for my children, they found so much comfort in the grief camps and learned that they were not alone. They were free to grieve in their own way. Creatively, they learned ways to celebrate their sister and soothe their heartache. Cornerstone was a place they were free to be with children that were grieving, and their sorrow turned to joy at camp. It has been a safe place for our hurt and a catalyst for our hope. Now it's been 7 years, but sometimes it feels like 7 seconds. But just as hurt has no expiration date, neither does healing. Thank you to my daughter Lorelle for living a life that will be remembered and not just numbered. Thank you, God, for gifting me with that miracle. And thank you, Cornerstone of Hope, for being a haven where no one grieves alone. Thank you for your time.